thinking better and thinking together about life's most important issues. A place to finally meet in the middle, to think freely and reasonably about the big questions of life. This is Thinker Sensitive. Welcome to the third episode of our new season on the question of God. I'm your host, Brian Ragazine. I want to preface today's episode with a short review and quick summation of some concepts that I established very early on in the history of this show. I established these concepts at the beginning of this podcast's existence for a reason, so that the ethical ideas in question would cover all that I said from that point forward. In some sense, it was a way to hold myself accountable to my own values. So let me apply some of these values to the topic of the question of God. First, my answer to the question of God is subjective. That is because I am a finite and fallible human being who is prone to error. And my answer also, at least in a certain sense, is a biased one. But this needs a bit more nuance. Bias entails, quote, prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair, end quote. My response to the question of God is biased in the sense that I enter this discussion with an already formed opinion. I am answering this question with a predisposed viewpoint, a theistic viewpoint. But this doesn't technically entail true bias, not according to the full sense of the term. I don't think my prejudice here, my predisposition, my previously established viewpoint is unfair or unjust. I think my prejudice here is just, and I think I possess my opinion on the matter for good reason. In this sense, I believe my bias is warranted, and this entire season will be a demonstration of this subjective assertion. Second, there are a few key distinctions that I should mention. The first of these is the distinction between bad criticism and good criticism. Bad criticism is defined by ridicule, insults, and name-calling that tears a person down or demonizes a person. It is often hasty, unthoughtful, inaccurate, uncharitable, uncritical, and dismissive. Good criticism, on the other hand, is sincere, thoughtful, and equitable. It raises critical objections against a belief or an idea, rather than against a person, and it is based on a genuine concern for what's true. The second key distinction is the distinction between an informed decision and an uninformed decision. I believe that the former is better than the latter. Most people would agree with this. I believe that this is universally valid and true across the board. I believe it's true in the political realm, the scientific realm, and yes, the religious realm as well. Third, the bigger a decision is, and the bigger the implications are, the more scrutiny is necessary. A serious question demands serious engagement, even critical engagement. You can't deal with a serious topic in a serious and critical way without offering good criticism and raising good objections. Fourth, I am someone who has always been open to good atheistic criticism against theism. And I've often gone out of my way to find such criticism. This is because I believe in the sincere search for truth. And part of a sincere search for truth is criticizing and scrutinizing your own beliefs, putting them through the ringer, so to speak, to see if they can survive such a test. Now, I could get offended by good atheistic arguments against theism. Maybe sometimes I do. But if I do, as long as those arguments are made in the right spirit, the offense that I feel is actually on me, not so much on them. As I've stated before, when making an argument, the first question that we should ask is not, is this offensive? But, is this true? Sometimes the truth is inherently offensive. There's nothing we can do about that. But ultimately, the issue of truth must be elevated, must be prioritized over the issue of offense. As considerate and sensitive as we should be to the feelings of others. Let me close this preface out with a few more principles that are worth mentioning. I'm going to treat these as quick hitters. There's a difference between disagreeing with someone and disliking someone. I can disagree with someone without disliking them. In fact, sometimes disagreement is actually a direct act of love. Believing that a group of people are wrong about something does not necessitate believing that said group of people are dumb or stupid or unintelligent or unreasonable. I've said this before and I'll say it again. The question of God and the way in which one chooses to answer the question is not a matter of intelligence. There are extremely intelligent people on both sides of this issue. Even if this question only involved the intellect, which it doesn't, it would still not be a matter of intelligence. This is because of human nature and the human condition. So this is not a matter of genius. It's a matter of perspective. This is not a matter of objectivity. This is a matter of subjectivity. This is not a matter of knowledge and raw data. It is a matter of interpretation. Finally, one can disagree with someone on an important topic while still valuing that person's opinions, and certainly while still valuing that person's mind. We don't have to devalue everything a person believes simply because we don't see eye to eye with them on a specific topic. This is where the value of tolerance comes into play. Something that Voltaire and I both think is crucial and vital for healthy societies. I don't agree with Voltaire on everything, but I can still find value in him. M. Night Shyamalan was one of the most promising up-and-coming directors of the late 90s and early 2000s, producing successful films like The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and Signs, making horror movies and thrillers that whole families could enjoy. Shyamalan was beginning to carve out a nice niche for himself. But then he hit a bit of a lull, a bit of a wall, which soon turned into an extended slump. His first ill-received movie in a long line of poorly received movies was The Village. I actually like this film, as I think it's quite original and unique. In the movie, residents in a mysterious village are directed to never leave the boundaries of their town. For if they cross the borders of the village, they risk being attacked and killed by the monsters living in the woods. What we find in the end is that this is all a clever ruse, one that was concocted by the governing body of the town to ensure that the village and its villagers remain isolated from the outside world, protected from the evil and corruption of modern society. The movie demonstrates an important aspect of the human condition that I want to highlight in this episode. The fact that our beliefs inform our actions. Our belief systems shape the way that we live our lives. Like the townspeople in the village, who never dared to breach their town's borders on the basis of their belief in monsters living in the woods, belief that God exists and belief that God doesn't exist have, or at least should have, a profound impact on our lifestyles, on the key choices that we make in life. Many atheists demonstrate a strong value for human life. The vast majority of atheists believe in human equality. Many atheists act as if objective morality truly exists and live moral lives. And many atheists live with great meaning and purpose. Here's the big question. When those who don't believe in God act and live like this, are they actually living more like non-theists or theists? Is practice lining up with theory? Is the effect consistent with the cause? Or is there actually a kind of defiance, a kind of inconsistency or conflict taking place here? On the other hand, many people who believe in God live as if they don't believe in God, as if the God that they profess doesn't exist in reality. They live selfishly, for themselves, instead of for the being that gave them life. If I'm being honest with myself, I live like I don't believe in God half the time. See, most of us are double-minded and double-hearted. My personal concern here is consistency and coherence between belief and practice, worldview and lifestyle. I expect people, including myself, to act in accordance with what they believe. The fact that many people, including myself, live in a cycle of internal and external conflict skews the importance of the question of God and distorts the implications of the question. The incoherence here devalues the significance of the question because the question is not influencing the subject the way that it should in reality. We can relate this concept to the question of the COVID-19 vaccine. If you believe in the efficacy of the vaccine and believe that it would be personally beneficial for you to get it, but you never actually schedule an appointment and get it, then you are devaluing the significance of the question, since your answer to the question is not influencing you in the way that it should. Things like nominalism, being associated with something in name only, and cognitive dissonance make this episode tricky. Many contemporary non-theists, agnostics, and atheists choose to take what can be called the existentialist route, which further clouds things. Let me define what I mean by this. Existentialism was founded by a Christian, the melancholy Dane Soren Kierkegaard. Existentialism begins with a hypercritical epistemology and metaphysical agnosticism. To put this in simple terms, it begins with the idea that as finite and fallible human beings, we can't really know anything about anything. The pursuit of knowledge and truth is a futile one. In the history of existentialism, this critical agnosticism is often paired with a nihilistic dread. Kierkegaard, in particular, invokes the book of Ecclesiastes at this point. The author of that notorious book from the Old Testament famously says, quote, "Vanity, vanity, all is vanity," and quote, "Everything is meaningless under the sun." In response to this dreary and sobering situation that existentialists would define as the human condition or human experience, the existentialist must make a decision. She can choose to wallow in the muck and mire of existential dread, or she can defiantly choose to overcome her situation. If knowledge is not a matter of the mind, because we can't really know anything about anything, then maybe it is a matter of the will. If life ceases to have real meaning, then maybe I must choose to live as if it has meaning anyway. Existentialism then makes truth and meaning a matter of pure choice. It's an attempt to, in a sense, will things into existence. And this is the route that many atheists take today in response to their denial of God. It is also worth mentioning that atheism is often misrepresented and misunderstood, particularly when it comes to issues of evolutionary theory. Some of these things I will deal with in this episode and in this season, but others will have to be dealt with in one-off weekly episodes due to time and complexity. What I can say really quickly is this. Atheistic interpretations of evolutionary theory often align better with pantheism than atheism. But here is my main thesis statement for this particular episode. Any atheist who takes the existentialist route, defiantly choosing to live as if life is endowed with ultimate meaning and purpose, eternal significance, objectivity, and absolutism in spite of an atheistic worldview, or who lives in cognitive dissonance for any number of reasons, is a nominal atheist, at least to some extent, in one way or another, and vice versa. If a theist doesn't live as if life is endowed with ultimate meaning and purpose, eternal significance, objectivity, and absolutism for any number of reasons despite a theistic worldview, he or she is a nominal theist, a theist in name only. My comments from this point forward will be in regards to real theism and real atheism, as opposed to nominal theism and nominal atheism. With all of that established, I want to finally give a brief sketch of each worldview. I will start with a theistic worldview. Theism asserts that God exists. God is the ground of all being, the source of all reality. He is also the only possible objective standard by which truth is measured, including moral and ethical truth. So he is the author of absolute and universal values, the objective standard by which all values are measured and all virtues are defined. Theism affirms that God is the creator of all things. He creates both out of himself and ex nihilo, which in Latin means out of nothing. In other words, he did not create the world out of anything pre-existing and external to himself, but rather he created the universe out of his personal values, his ideas, his mind, his will. This means that all created things are good and holy by virtue of the fact that they come from a good and holy God. Everything in the universe demands our respect and reverence. Nature should even engender a sense of awe and wonder, for it is the product of an awe-inspiring God. Because creation was orchestrated and superintended by a rational being, there is a profound sense of order, design, and intention in the universe. A theistic understanding of creation informs a theist's anthropology. Humans are created in the image of God. We are transcendental creatures, endowed with rationality, freedom, and conscience. As beings in time, humans are creatures in process of becoming. Our experiences, thoughts, actions, and decisions all inform who we are and who we will be, as we are in the process of moving towards the completion or finalization of the totality of our being, of self-actualization in eternity. See, we were created for eternal fellowship with our Creator. In theism, there is continuity and coherence between time and eternity. Time represents the stage of development. Eternity represents the moment of consummation. There is a goal, an end, a telos for humanity in theism, the consummation and redemption of our personal history, and everlasting communion with God. All of this gives great value to our decisions and our actions in time. It gives our lives great meaning and purpose. It gives us hope. And the leading psychological research of our day demonstrates this. On the contrary, atheism asserts that God does not exist. This means that objective values and absolute truths do not exist. See, without God, there is no truly objective criterion by which to measure truth claims and weigh value judgments. All ideas, all claims, all beliefs, including beliefs about morality and ethics, about good and evil, are purely subjective and relative to a particular individual or a particular society. And they are always subjectively conditioned by time and space. Atheism affirms that the universe was produced without design or intention. The world is the product of blind chance and pure randomness. There was no mind, no will, no morality, no person or being within or behind the formation of the universe and the development of the world. The universe, an unintelligent, non rational, brainless, and mindless universe, just created itself. All the novel results of the evolutionary process that we see and experience today were birthed from non living matter, from chemicals, gases, acids, and atoms, from mere material. This is why atheism is often referred to as reductionistic materialism. Creation is the result of a purely adaptive process. Furthermore, the universe is cold and indifferent. There is no meaning and purpose in existence. Nothing is holy and sacred. Nothing is inherently good. It just is. Things don't have any kind of inherent value or worth. They just are. If there seems to be order or design in the universe, it just so happens to be there. An atheistic understanding of creation and evolutionary development informs an atheist's anthropology. Humans were not created in the image of God. They were not fearfully and wonderfully made. They were not produced with intention or purpose. In this sense, they have no real meaning. Humans are the product of mere happenstance. They are reducible to pure matter, the amalgamation of atoms and cells. They are not transcendental. There is no such thing as soul or spirit. The human is just another animal, just another material object, just another thing. Humans are not eternal creatures, for nothing persists or endures beyond life. In atheism, there is no lasting hope for humanity. Death is the final word. The implications of these worldviews, and therefore the implications of the question of God, are vast and profound. Nietzsche, the father of modern atheism and the most popular atheist to ever walk the earth, someone who has become extremely popular and trendy amongst young people, particularly since the end of the 20th century and into the 21st century, will serve as my main example and main representative of real atheism in this section. The first implication that I want to discuss is the value of human life and equality amongst human beings. The idea that all human beings were created equal in the image of God gives respect, dignity, and sanctity to all human beings. Martin Luther King Jr. built his entire program on this fundamental idea. On the contrary, the idea that all human beings are reducible to mere matter and products of pure happenstance minimizes the value of human beings. And in my opinion, it is more susceptible to beliefs of inequality. Again, the Imago Dei has been foundational to the establishment and promotion of civil rights and human equality in modern democratic governments. Atheism strips the human person of sacredness, holiness, goodness, worth, value, soul, spirit, and transcendence. It dehumanizes the human person. On page 25 of his work, The Antichrist, Nietzsche has this to say about human beings. Quote, "He, the human, is in truth anything but the crown of creation. Beside him stand many other animals, all at similar stages of development. End quote. On page 56 of the same work, Nietzsche says this, quote, "Nowadays, no one has courage anymore for special rights, for the right of dominion, for feelings of honorable pride in himself and his equals, for the pathos of distance. Our politics is sick with this lack of courage. The aristocratic attitude of mind has been undermined by the lie of the equality of souls." End quote. The second implication has to do with morality and ethics. Theism affirms objective ethical values and universal moral principles. It affirms that morality has a real metaphysical existence apart from the human mind's subjective perception of it, apart from human subjectivity and human relativity. Atheism rejects this. In atheism, there is no real right and wrong, no true good and evil. Morality is simply an illusion, or an individual or societal construction, or some kind of evolutionary development, the product of a mere adaptive and non-moral process. Human morality is purely subjective and relative, a personal preference, or just an opinion. Nietzsche was known for his, quote, transvaluation of all values, end quote. I mean, he wrote a book called Beyond Good and Evil, which I've read and have on my bookshelf. Nietzsche sought to deconstruct traditional moral and ethical understandings. I like how Wikipedia describes Nietzsche's transvaluation of values. I think it's pretty spot on. The author writes, quote, "Transvaluation would mean the exaltation of life rather than the exaltation of suffering, and an acceptance of every instinct or lust as organic and therefore valid, and so beyond the scope of moral condemnation. What one desires would be merely what one desires, rather than either sinful or pious." End quote. Let's let Nietzsche speak for himself here. On page 23 of The Antichrist, he states, quote, "A virtue must be our invention. It must spring out of our personal need and defense. In every other case, it is a source of danger." End quote. And on page 2 of The Antichrist, Nietzsche writes, quote, "What is good? Whatever augments the feeling of power, the will to power, power itself in man. What is evil? Whatever springs from weakness. What is happiness? The feeling that power increases, that resistance is overcome. Not contentment, but more power. Not peace at any price, but war. Not virtue, but efficiency. Virtue in the Renaissance sense. Virtue free of moral acid." End quote. The third implication has to do with meaning and purpose. The theistic understandings of cosmology and anthropology fill life with meaning and purpose. Who I am becoming, and everything and everyone who influences who I'm becoming really, truly matter. When you take away these ideas of purpose and intention, life is but a dream, an open world video game. There's no ultimate meaning to my actions, beliefs, and relationships. There's no real purpose to life itself. Life is an accident of materialistic processes. Eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity. Everything is meaningless under the sun. In his essay, The Rebel, Albert Camus, a famous atheistic philosopher and writer, said this, quote, "If we believe in nothing, if nothing has any meaning, and if we can affirm no values whatsoever, then everything is possible and nothing has any importance." End quote. The fourth implication has to do with the trustworthiness of the mind, which all humans study and learning and research and knowledge are based on, including science and evolutionary theory. In an atheistic or materialistic or naturalistic worldview, the thoughts formulated in the human mind are purely adaptive, resulting from electrochemical synapses in the brain that have no concern for truth or falsity. This means that the belief in atheism itself cannot be trusted, since it is merely the product of a non rational adaptive process that has no concern for truth. Belief in atheism is not rationally constituted. Atheism is self defeating because it casts doubt on the human mind. And belief in atheism is the product of the human mind. The atheist has no real reason to trust his mind, his thoughts, and his beliefs. Atheism then undermines all scientific research, including the study of evolutionary theory. But it also undermines all human knowledge in general. This is precisely what Alvin Plantinga, one of the great analytic philosophers, argues in his evolutionary argument against naturalism. There is a reason why modern science was invented by theists, by those who had a philosophical basis for trusting their minds, by those who believed that the universe was orderly and lawful since it was the product of intelligence, and therefore by those who believed that the universe could be studied and understood. John Lennox, a professor of mathematics and philosophy of science at the University of Oxford and a believer in God, has this to say on the subject. Quote, "The scientist's confidence in reason ultimately depends on the existence of a rational and purposeful creator. Otherwise, our thoughts are nothing more than electrochemical events, the chattering of soulless synapses. If you take the atheistic, naturalistic, materialistic view, you are going to invalidate the reasoning process. Because in the end, you are going to say that the brain is simply the end product of a blind, unguided process. If that's the case, why should you trust it? The materialist view inevitably gives birth to a form of determinism that appears to mock our essential humanity. Biological determinism robs human beings of any claim to dignity and freedom. Free will, we are told, is an illusion." End quote. And Lennox says in another place, quote, "Of course, I reject atheism because I believe Christianity to be true. But I also reject it because I'm a scientist? How could I be impressed with a worldview that undermines the very rationality we need to do science? Science and God mix very well. It is science and atheism that do not mix. End quote. The fifth and final implication relates to objectivity in truth and knowledge. Existentialists are right to a certain extent. Human beings are finite and fallible, which means everything that I'm saying right now could be false. Emphasis on the word could. Error is always a human possibility. Human knowledge is geographically, historically, and culturally conditioned. All humans interpret reality through a subjective lens. There is no such thing as a detached human observer. We are all influenced by a host of presuppositions, biases, desires, and other internal and external factors. And all human norms, standards, and criteria that are used to make judgments are subjective, relative, and faith based because they all involve the finite and fallible human subject. And they are all conditioned by space and time. This is why God is the only possible objective standard by which to measure what is true and false. Only God, who exists outside of the conditions of space time and is both infinite and infallible, can know things objectively as they are in themselves, to use Kantian language. Humans believe things. God knows things. Humans are subject to error. God is not. Humans are confined to a definitive space or location. God is everywhere at the same time. Humans are subject to change, including a change in opinion. God does not change, for he knows that he knows all things, and he knows that he is perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Only theists can affirm the existence of objective truth, absolute values, and universal moral and ethical principles. Again, only theists can affirm with any consistency and coherence that truth has a real metaphysical existence apart from our minds and our subjectivity. Any atheist who acts as if there is objectivity in truth is either unaware of these things or is not a real atheist, but only a nominal one. This is why Nietzsche's program is so self-contradictory and self-defeating. And by the way, this is why all hypercritical epistemologies, theories of knowledge that essentially state that we can't really know anything about anything, are self-contradictory and self-defeating. Nietzsche has no real basis, no logical and rational foundation for trusting his mind and believing in truth. Yet his works are full of truth claims. He attempts to build a new morality without having any basis for believing in morality. His critical worldview and ideology undercut all of his own thinking and writing. This is true of a lot of contemporary deconstructionism, by the way. Nietzsche has no foundation for making claims and making arguments and forming meaningful and trustworthy opinions. He is building his house upon the sand. This is one of the reasons why self criticism and self awareness are so important, things that are lacking in a lot of Nietzsche's work. On page 25 of The Antichrist, Nietzsche has this to say about truth. Quote, "Let us not underestimate this fact, that we ourselves, we free spirits, are already a transvaluation of all values, a visualized declaration of war and victory against all the old concepts of true and not true." End quote. I can only speak for myself here, but if I didn't believe in God, I think I would probably be a nihilist, a narcissist, and a hedonist, just like Ayn Rand and Friedrich Nietzsche. On page 23 of The Antichrist, Nietzsche writes, quote, "An action prompted by the life instinct proves that it is a right action by the amount of pleasure that goes with it." End quote. The 20th century writer and atheistic philosopher Ayn Rand, another real atheist in my opinion, had a lot of things to say about narcissism and hedonism. In one place she states, quote, "Achievement of your happiness is the only moral purpose of your life. And that happiness, not pain or mindless self-indulgence, is the proof of your moral integrity, since it is the proof and the result of your loyalty to the achievement of your values." End quote. In another place, she says, quote, "If any civilization is to survive, it is the morality of altruism that men have to reject." End quote. Finally, in yet another place, she says, quote, "Every honest man lives for himself. Every man worth calling a man lives for himself. The one who doesn't live at all." End quote. If I didn't believe in God, I would probably only live morally out of selfish ambition and with ulterior motives. This is consistent with Richard Dawkins' theory of the selfish gene, which he turned into a book in 1976. For example, I would most likely only work with integrity in order to move up the economic ladder. I would vote for a particular piece of legislation that promoted the greater good only if it benefited me personally. And I would be a good friend merely because of the personal, psychological, emotional, and social benefits. If I were an atheist, I would probably view and treat other people as tools, instruments, and objects, believing that they were soulless and spiritless creatures, no different in substance and nature than any other cellular thing, other than maybe being a little more complex. I certainly wouldn't believe that life had any ultimate purpose or meaning. And I would probably treat life like a disenchanted open world video game. Of course, I wouldn't have any hope of life beyond death either, as death is simply extinction, the end of a random blip on a screen that no one is watching. As a person who believes in God, however, my life is full of meaning and purpose. As a transcendental creature who is in a process of becoming something eternal and final, my choices are full of significance, including my moral choices. Life to me is full of beauty, wonder, and awe. I see the miraculous and supernatural everywhere. All the time, every day, I am surrounded by walking, talking miracles, by human beings like yourself. I see God in you, in all things, shining through them in all of his eternal glory. Spirit in matter, soul in cells, a prolepsis, eternity in time, an anticipation of what is to come. As a theist, I believe in real and lasting truth, goodness, and values that are worth pursuing. I believe that the moral life is the good life. I believe that the holy life is the happy life. I believe that true altruism is real and possible. I believe that all people have absolute, eternal value, and therefore are worthy of my respect, service, sacrifice, kindness, compassion, forgiveness, self-giving, my life and my love, with no strings attached. As a theist, my existence is full of hope, and I patiently look forward to a wonderful and novel future beyond this life. My personal belief in God has had a major impact on my experience. The question of God is such a practical question to me. It has shaped almost every important decision that I've made in my life. My college, graduate school, and my majors were all chosen on the basis of my belief in God. I would have never met my wife, Courtney, and I most likely would have never gotten married at all if I didn't believe in God. I would have never moved to the state of Colorado. I wouldn't live here if it wasn't for my faith in God. In fact, Courtney and I moved here for the sole purpose of starting a house church. None of my friendships here would exist if it weren't for how I've chosen to answer the question of God. And my current career path and my jobs are based exclusively on my belief in God. How can a worldview be any more practical and impactful? Circling back to the issue of nominal atheism, some have tried to skirt the connection between atheism and nihilism, the belief that there are no real values and that life has no meaning. Some view the connection as more of a possibility than a necessity. Nietzsche himself feared nihilism, and he felt it quickly approaching as an impending and inevitable outcome of atheism. But he sought to avoid it through an existential choice. But such a move, in my opinion, is more of a contradiction, a purely arbitrary and capricious construction, than a viable and coherent option. In my opinion, real, true, authentic atheism necessitates nihilism. The very definition of nihilism is intrinsically contained within the concept of atheism itself. Listen to the Merriam-Webster definition of nihilism. Quote, "A viewpoint that traditional values and beliefs are unfounded, and that existence is senseless and useless. A doctrine that denies any objective ground of truth, and especially of moral truths." End quote. This is what atheism is. This is what atheism does. I believe that nihilism is the necessary effect of atheism as its primary cause. Nietzsche himself understood this, in part because he was a real atheist, as opposed to a nominal one. And real atheists are nihilists by definition. Nietzsche had the courage to be a real atheist. He had the courage to embrace the natural and inevitable nihilistic implications of atheism. In this sense, he deserves our respect. But he mostly deserves our respect because he is a creation of the living God, made in the very image of God, reflecting the very beauty of God. My hope and my prayer is that Nietzsche found God and was forever changed by God's love in the last waking moments of his life, or in the very mystery of death itself. My hope is that one day I will meet Nietzsche and embrace him in the kingdom. I talked earlier about how all of us are double-minded and double-hearted in some way. The duality of man, some say. See, the spirit of Nietzsche, the spirit of atheism, the spirit of nihilism lives in me as well. Thinking, feeling, living as if God doesn't exist half the time. Oh, the duality of man. I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good that I want to do, but the evil that I do not want to do. This I keep on doing. What a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from this body of death? There's only one possible answer to that ancient question written on papyrus in the 1st century. The Apostle Paul knew what it was. Do you know what the answer is?